Yo, yo.
We are live. We are live like we always are about this time.
Yep. Tuesdays at 9 p.m. We've been pretty consistent. I tell you that.
All right. All right. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, roll in here, fam. Tonight we are talking about high value. What even that means. Trying to figure it out. Figure it out. But
Yep.
before we do that, I guess let's figure out what's been in the news this week.
Let's do it.
Okay, as you know, we just went through the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2020 here, had the closing ceremonies. Let's see how the USA fared. Looks like the United States is up at the top of the leaderboard here with 39 golds, 41 silvers, and 33 bronze for a total of 113 medals. China came out with 38 golds, 32 silvers, and 18 bronze for a total of 88 combined. Japan with 27 gold, 14 silver, 17 bronze, 58 total. Great Britain, 22 golds, 21 silvers, 22 bronze, 65 total. And ROC, 20 gold, 28 silver, 23 bronze, and 71 overall.
I think ROC is like Russian or Russia or something like that.
It's not Rock Nation.
Yeah. I don't know. Are we going to have? I don't think we have the slide. Do we have the slide on Will Smith, or we did that last week with Rock Nation and Will Smith?
uh, we do have a slide. It's coming up later in our news roundup here. But before that, we'll just show this is the ladies 4x100. Jamaica took the gold in that one. U.S. took silver, and Great Britain took the bronze.
Dope.
Congratulations, ladies.
Nice. A black realtor was showing a home to a black father and son. They were handcuffed by Michigan police. It looks like a black realtor was showing a house to a black man and his 15-year-old son in a Michigan suburb last week when they looked outside and saw police officers surround the property with their guns drawn. I knew once they surrounded the home, they were preparing for a standoff, the father, Roy Thorne, told CNN's Don Lemon Friday. And so my instincts told me we need to get out of here. We need to get to where they can see that we're not a threat. A neighbor had called authorities saying a suspect arrested at the property a week prior had returned to the scene, according to the Wyoming, Michigan Department of Public Safety, but the caller was mistaken. The realtor, Eric Brown, was giving Thorne and his son Samuel a tour of the home in the community of Wyoming, just outside of Grand Rapids. After scheduling the visit online the day before, all three were eventually released without incident, but not before Wyoming police ordered them out of the home with their hands up and handcuffed each of them, briefly placing Thorne and his 15-year-old son in the back seats of separate patrol vehicles, according to the footage released by Wyoming police. I was worried, Thorne said, but I was just more concerned about getting my son out of that situation, getting us all out of there. Asked if he felt they had been racially profiled, Brown said, in that moment, it certainly felt that way. He found it difficult to justify the level of force used, he said, describing it as a, quote, tactical, end quote, response. In a statement Friday, the Wyoming Department of Public Safety said it had conducted an internal review and concluded race played no role in our officers' treatment of the individuals, and our officers responded appropriately.
Wow, sounds extreme.
Yep.
House hunting while being black. Amazon has reportedly instituted a lottery that will give frontline workers the chance to win $500,000 and other prizes if they're vaccinated against COVID-19. Amazon really wants its workforce vaccinated against COVID-19. And the online retail giant has announced a corporate lottery for frontline employees who can prove their vaccination status, Bloomberg reported. The Max Your Vax contest is open to frontline employees, which includes its warehouse and logistics workers, as well as hourly workers in Whole Food markets, Amazon Fresh Groceries, and Amazon Web Service data centers, Bloomberg reported this Friday. The contest will offer up 18 prizes, which Amazon value at almost $2 million, according to Bloomberg. This includes two $500,000 and six $100,000 cash prizes, 5 new vehicles, and 5 vacation packages. Amazon did not immediately respond to requests for comment by Insider.
Vax that thing up.
Vax it up. Looks like there's putting lots of incentives on the table for that. We don't have a slide, but a report actually came out that for the opposite, if you're not vaccinated, your employer could take $50 out of each of your paychecks.
Wow. An arrest made in slaying of prominent Los Angeles banker. Police arrested a man Friday on suspicion of murdering a leader in the Los Angeles financial community, a Bank of America vice president, and a mother of 2 in her home in Reseda this week. The Los Angeles Police Department on Friday announced the arrest of 52-year-old Anthony Dwayne Turner in connection with the death of Michelle Avon, whose body was found by police officers during a welfare check Thursday morning at her home in the 19300 block of Covello Street. According to investigators, Avon's cause of death was still pending, but there was evidence she suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Avon, 48, and Turner had a personal relationship, but she had recently considered obtaining a restraining order against him, authorities told NBC4. May she rest in power.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Does not sound like we'll talk about this tonight, but that doesn't sound like a high value prospect to me. The murderer, that is. Okay. Burgess Owens introduces bill banning racial segregation in federal diversity trainings. Rep. Burgess Owens introduced a bill Tuesday that would ban the federal government from funding diversity training that divide employees based on their race. Owens said no to Indoctrination Act comes in response to the spread of controversial doctrine on critical race theory in schools, governments, and corporations nationwide. From the Tulsa Massacre and Jim Crow and Juneteenth, young Americans deserve to learn about all significant events in our country's history, the Utah Republican said about his legislation. Critical race theory, however, teaches students that America is, what's that there?
It's like irredeemably
Racist, and intrinsic characteristics like race, color, and national origin define you. As we strive to address injustice, I'm proud to introduce the Say No to Indoctrination Act to keep taxpayer dollars from funding discriminatory practices and divisive worldviews. Owens' bill was first reported by the Daily Caller. In June, President Biden signed an executive order that required race and diversity trainings at federal government level, which Republicans have argued is divisive and only inflames racial tensions.
Well, speaking of Jay-Z and Will Smith, Ida B. Wells, or I think better known as Nicole Hannah Jones, she goes by her Twitter, Ida B. Wells. Shout out to Ida B. Wells, by the way. Actually, her name's Ida Bay Wells, so my bad. Anyway, she tweeted looks like she had a article or a Twitter that said credit counseling is not what will take low income renters to homeowners. Wealth will. All this program does is charge struggling people additional fees for being poor, which is what every other predatory lender does. The tweet linked to an article about how Jay-Z's Rock Nation and Smith's Dreamers venture capital recently invested in the startup Landis Technology. According to its website, the company helps renters transition to home ownership. So yeah, it looks like she had a few words for our brothers Jay-Z and Will Smith. All right, Kim, I think you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah, you're breaking up. I'll tell you what, I'll go on to the next news and review, and then I guess if you want to come back, we'll pick it up from there. Let's see what else is in the news here. All right, so judge asks why Capitol rioters are paying just $1.5 million for attack, while taxpayers will pay more than $500 million. A federal judge on Monday questioned why U.S. prosecutors are asking Capitol riot defendants to pay only $1.5 million in restitution, while American taxpayers are paying more than $500 million to cover the costs of the January 6th attack by a pro-Trump mob. Chief U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell of Washington challenged the toughness of the Justice Department's stance in a plea hearing for a Colorado Springs man who admitted to one of 4 nonviolent misdemeanor counts of picketing in the U.S. Capitol. Howell has already asked in another defendant's plea hearing whether no prison misdemeanor pleas deals offered by the government are too lenient for individuals involved in terrorizing members of Congress, asking pointedly whether the government had any concern about deterrence. On Monday, she pressed the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington why it was seeking to require only $2,000 in each felony case and $500 in each misdemeanor case. I'm accustomed to the government being fairly aggressive in terms of fraud when there have been damages that accrue from a criminal act for the restitution amount, said Howell, a former Brooklyn federal prosecutor and Senate Judiciary Committee General Counsel. Where we have Congress acting, appropriating all this money due directly to the events of January 6th, I have found the damage amount of less than $1.5 million when all of us American taxpayers are about to foot the bill for close to $500 million. A little bit surprising, she said.
Hey, I made it back into the show. Thanks for keeping things going. I'll let you take this one and I'll pick up the last slide.
All right. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo resigns. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said Tuesday that he will resign, relinquishing under extraordinary pressure his decade-long grip on power and heading off a potential impeachment by New York's Democratic-led legislature a week after the release of a report by the state attorney general that found he had sexually harassed 11 women. Given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing, Cuomo said in remarks from New York City. Therefore, that's what I'll do. Yep, looks like he's doing whatever he's doing and resigning.
Bye-bye. But I don't know why Biden's still running around sniffing kids. Yeah. White woman who stole $250K gets probation, while Black woman who stole $40K goes to jail. Disparate sentencing sparks calls for reform. Cleveland, Ohio. Two Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court judges doled out disparate sentences this week to women who stole public money in separate cases. Reuniting calls to create a statewide sentencing database to ensure judges met out fair punishments. A white woman stole nearly $250 from the village of Chagrin Falls. Judge Holly Gallagher sentenced her on Monday to 2 years of probation. A black woman stole $40,000 from Maple Heights City Schools and went before Judge Rick Bell, who sentenced her Tuesday to 18 months in prison. Leaders of Black faith organizations, labor organizations, current and former judges, and social activist groups all told Cleveland.com that and the Planned Dealer that the stark difference between the sentences damaged the credibility of the criminal justice system and reinforced the sentiment that judges disproportionately punish people of color or those without means. Bosworth, the white woman, had more than $200,000 in her pension and used that to pay back some money. She also cut a check for the remaining $100,000 on the day of sentencing. Assistant Cuyahoga County Prosecutor James Gutierrez sought a prison sentence for Hopkins, the black lady. He told Bell that the state would be fine with a sentence of between 9 and 12 months. Bell sentenced her to 18 months in prison, 6 more months than Gutierrez requested.
Wow.
So that story was posted on the 8th of August. So that lets you know, fam, this is still happening. Yeah.
Good
in the news.
System.
Yeah. In the news.
All right. Yeah, I think you're on mute if you want to come back in. There you go.
So what we talking about today?
All right. So if anybody wants to call in, you can call in at 720-740-9699. That's 720-740-9699. You get in there, hit 657-2569. Hit 657-2569. So yeah, so today we are talking about, the difference between, I guess, what we consider high value versus real value, and what that means on an individual level and a family level and a community level. So I guess let's get right into it. I don't know if anybody is familiar with I think this is the first slide, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know too many people who are familiar with Kevin Samuels. Most people know him online as a relationship quote unquote expert. I'm using that loosely. I guess he has a pretty large following now on YouTube predominantly. And so he's set some criteria that I guess some people are abiding by, or saying this is kind of what a high value person, especially Black men, should be and should attain to. So I guess Eartha Hopkins actually wrote an article, an opinion piece about how she felt about Kevin Samuels. So let's read this. So the title of the article is How Pseudo Love Guru Kevin Samuels Exploits the vulnerability, come on, of Black women. In a racist, white supremacist environment, Samuels' assertions only affirm an Anglo-Saxon ideology using Black women as an easy scapegoat. Kevin Samuels is a YouTube sensation and self-appointed professional image consultant. His meteoric rise to fame on social media rose from his slick-tongued comments aimed at, in particular, Black women. His advice to modern Black women searching for a high-value man mixes hard truths with a dose of entertainment. His platform opens a space for much-needed conversation addressing women's accountability and relationships. However, his framework is rooted in an imperialistic worldview that subtly reinforces anti-Blackness. Like so many YouTube experts before him, he exploits the pain and vulnerability of Black women's quest for love while the world watches in amusement. On this platform, Samuel says his perspective represents the modern, high-value Black man while cautioning women opposing his perspective. In a racist, white supremacist environment, Kevin Samuels' assertions only affirm an Anglo-Saxon ideology using Black women as an easy scapegoat. Kim, you want to take the next one?
Sure. How pseudo-love guru Kevin Samuels exploits the now it's my turn. Vulnerability of Black women. We're vulnerable. Okay, so here's a list that includes unrealistic expectations, check. Samuels maintains the market defines a high-value man by 6 core principles. A man's ability to earn at least $10K monthly, earning of $10K monthly over the course of 5 years.
Lord.
Yeah, so it can't just be a fluke, fellas. Nope. Acceptance from a group of other high-value men, access to fraternity-like network, an accepted prominent position by society, the ability to be of use by other high-value men.
Interesting.
Okay, and next up, I'll go ahead and go through this one too. How pseudo-love guru Kevin Samuels exploits the vulnerability of Black women. Suppose Black women take his advice at face value. In that case, it creates an unrealistic aspiration of seeking a Black male partner with the median income for Black men being $814 weekly and only 10% of America's total population of men earning 6 figures. Not to mention, incarceration rates for Black men are double that of white men. In the U.S., it's nearly impossible for those men to qualify for the remaining principles. Rather than use these statistics as a guiding post to compel Black women to reframe their definitions and expectations of potential Black male mates, he exploits them. He capitalizes off women's desire for stability by comparing Black men against a biased white male standard. Those who do not qualify financially are deemed average. This basic premise places Black men in a seemingly undesirable position by default. Samuel's positioning this leads women down a dead-end path to seek an unrealistic minority of male population. Minority of the male population.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, sometimes how I would just say society in general views what is supposed to be deemed as valuable and what's not valuable. And it's unfortunate because that oftentimes, especially finances, ruins relationships. You know, instead of trying to look at partnership as being something of an asset, you know, you building wealth together, you know, it's deemed as an individualistic thing. And, you know, unfortunately people get caught up, you know, in I don't know if you want to call it maybe something like stuff that's not really the essence of understanding the true worth, of a person. But that's the thing about it, is we live in a very capitalistic society, right? So instead of looking at people with their true human value, right, capitalism looks at people as assets, commodities. What can you do for me? And it doesn't do anything, just in my humble opinion, to help out the Black community and Black people as a whole. I mean, when you start throwing out numbers like 120,000, and then we know what the average Black man makes, and especially young Black men make, I mean, then what is that supposed to be doing for Black women? Are Black women just supposed to say, oh well, I guess there's no available Black men out there? So
Yeah, well, like you said, expectations are pretty unrealistic. I don't know a lot of people making 10K a week. But by the
I
same
don't know a lot of white men making 10K a week.
right. Anybody is on that list. So very unrealistic. And I'm with you that, you need to pick out your partners by wanting to work together and come up together. But you also want people to have values like and principles such as hardworking and all of those things. But sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work when we're dealing with these systemic systems that we're in. You just might never get to a high value earning income. So what does that mean for relationships? I mean, I don't know if you've heard the phrase romance without finance equals nuisance, but I mean, what are you supposed to do?
I know, right? Well, capitalism at its finest, I tell you.
All right, let's go to the next
Capitalism.
slide. Oh, what were you saying, Umoya?
Speaking of capitalism, let's go to the next slide here, family. All right, so this is true value. We're not basing it off some just made up, understanding of some YouTuber. And shout out to Kevin Samuels. I don't have any issue with the brother. He's doing what he's doing. But we're just trying to put things in some type of proper context here. So there was an article written, looks like by Miami University, and also by Loyola University in Chicago, where they talked about measuring slavery in 2020 dollars. So let's go on to this article here. So why does anything, first of all, have value? So let's establish what value is in this context. Monetary value can be measured by a transaction when something is bought and sold, or as an accepted value of an asset currently held. Some assets have value because of the potential income they can generate. An example would be a piece of capital equipment, such as a cotton gin for which planters would pay to have their cotton processed, or a slave would pick the cotton. Other assets may have value because of their potential resale value, such as land or a rare painting. The owners of a painting choose to have part of a wealth invested in something that does not generate current income, either because of an expectation that it will appreciate or because they wish to consume the pleasure of owning it. These assets also may give their owner status and power. Owning a Rembrandt painting gives one bragging rights among art collectors. Owning half the acres in the county gives one lots of influence in local politics, regardless of whether the acres are in production or not.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. All good, you know how we do. So in the article goes on and starts, asking these questions, right? And one of the questions is what is the comparable value of a slave in today's prices? So can you want to take that, or you want me to keep rolling?
Let's see here. None of these prices has much meaning to us today, but they would if we revalue them in today's dollars to the amount of money slave owners spent 170 years ago. 9, the techniques developed in measuring worth, have created 10 measures to use to compare a monetary value in one period to one in another, as explained in the essay, Measures of Worth. Of these 10, there are useful for discussing the value of a slave. They are labor or income value, relative earnings in real price. Using these measures, the value in 2020 of 400 in 1850, the average price of a slave that year ranges from 14,000 to 240,000. We use the 1850 price in our examples as that was close to the average price for the entire antebellum period. Okay, labor or income value. As discussed above, the 400 price in 1850 represents the expected net value of the future labor services a slave would provide. Most slaves worked on farms and plantations of their owners, although some slaves were rented out for farm work and other types of work. In either case, the work they did was mostly unskilled. So a comparable measure of the value of these services is reflected in the unskilled wage. That is why the labor or income value using the unskilled wage is the best measure of value of a slave's services in today's prices. That 400 would be 114,000 in today's price. As figure 3 shows, during the antebellum period, the value of today's dollars of slaves ranged from 60,000 in 1809 to 184,000 in 1859.
All right, yeah, we'll be showing that figure in a couple of slides coming up. All right, in other words, we can assume that the unskilled wage a free employee would have received to do similar work to that of a slave is a reasonable approximation of the value slave owners imputed for labor in the price of a slave. To be clear, the calculation is not the present value of what one would have to pay a free laborer to do the work of a slave then or now. Recall that the price of a slave measures the average present value of the net return over the slave's life expectancy. Slaves received room, board, and clothing, but they were responsible for producing a large portion of those items. Slaves were driven to produce a greater output than they would have produced had they been free. Finally, the work week has become shorter and life expectancy longer than in the mid 1850s. This calculation uses the unskilled wage to give an approximation of what it costs to acquire a slave then in today's dollars. Remarkably, even at these prices, some slaves, mainly those with artisan skills, might ultimately earn enough to buy themselves and perhaps their family out of slavery. It was not uncommon, especially in the Old South, for masters to allow others to hire the services of his or her slaves. This was particularly true of slaves who lived in the urban areas independent of the master. They were expected to make their own arrangement. The master fixed the wage that the slaves must bring in. All above this amount, the slave might keep himself. Employers frequently hired the slave's time from the owner at a certain amount and paid the slave an additional wage contingent on the amount of work accomplished.
Okay, so what is this chart telling us here?
Okay, so it looks like this chart is what they're calling a labor income value. So starting in 1804, going all the way up to 1860, is showing the values of the income value for a slave. So looks like starting in 1804, the value started at around $100,000, and then as time went on, it decreased a little bit over in the 1810s ish. Then it increased again in 1816, and then it decreased a little bit in 1804. But as you could see, as time went on, it increased itself all the way up to around 100 and probably like $70,000. So if we're talking about, you know, what black men's worth is, in terms of hitting that 120,000 K mark. Yeah, a lot of us, if we're basing it on of what our ancestors put into this country, obviously would almost go above and beyond that. And that's just on an unskilled level, right? And that's not even talking about some of the artisan levels. So yeah, this is real value here, family. This isn't just based on, some arbitrary, number that's floating around there.
Right. Like I said, it's the most valuable commodity. You know, owning slaves was, even more valuable than houses. So, if we're looking at that in terms of value, definitely worth a lot there. Okay, let's look at some of the terms for let's see, womanhood here. Definition of womanhood: the state of being a woman, the distinguishing character or qualities of a woman or womankind. Womankind. Distinctively feminine nature, womanness, a woman who is a servant or personal attendant, wife, mistress, girlfriend. Okay. I'll let you take the next slide, which is manhood.
Manhood, the condition of being a human being, qualities associated with men, manliness, the condition of being an adult male as distinguished from a child or female, adult males, men, and then it mentions the male anatomy. So I'm sure you can read it, but I think people will get the gesture.
Condition of being a human. Was that on the womanhood slide?
Yeah, that's very interesting. The kind of biased right there, that the two definitions showed, right? When we talk about what this dictionary is defining as womanhood and the other dictionary defining at what manhood is, right? And this is obviously coming from, an English perspective and an English, dictionary. So hey, this is their definition of what womanhood, manhood is, right? So, and I think that's kind of segueing into, what reparations may look like, or how do we define, as non-white people or specifically black people, how do we define, womanhood, manhood, if you guys want to call in, please call in. Let's get the number up again here. Call in 720-740-9699. Pushing that code 657-2569, 657-2569. And let us know what you think a high value person is, or what a real value, is. And also what womanhood and what manhood is. Is money involved with being, a woman? Is money involved with being a man? Is that the true essence of value, in our society? So yeah, so it's just very interesting, like even with those definitions, kind of the hypocrisy that we live in and that we ingest, as black people here, that we take on, because we're taking on these definitions, right, of somebody else. And that's why reparations is so important. I mean, because obviously we want those cash payments, right? That's obvious, but there's a lot of things that we need in addition to those cash payments. We need to talk about, what ideologies, what did we lose, before we got kidnapped over here? How did we think? We need, a lot of black people need a psychological help. You know what I mean? We have a lot of post-traumatic slave syndrome going on here. We need to get through that. I believe that's part of the reparations process too. Like, what conditioning happened to us, as the great book, Miseducation of the Negro. We've just been miseducated, and it's systemic at this point.
And
It's just
what conditioning is still happening? Do you see these definitions on womanhood and manhood changing over time with all the talk of gender fluidity happening? Maybe soon it'll just be one definition for both. The way things are going.
hey, I mean, that's possible. I mean, they're putting that in legislation now. In some parts, in some states are encouraging this, some states aren't. Um, we'll see. But just in terms
Mm-hmm.
of like, you know, black people's kind of perspective, right? This is kind of what we have to talk about. Like, and it's sometimes it's the big elephant in the room, that people don't want to talk about race, especially black people, because then we start getting into religion, we start getting into finances, we start getting into so many things that unfortunately that has affected the black community. That I don't know. I mean, even families don't even want to talk about it. Don't even talk about the atrocities on a systemic level that have happened to us, and that how that plays out into our existence in our families, right? Even if we are a well functioning oil family, right? Here in
Right.
America, there's still some things that people just don't talk about because they're just like, well, we don't want to talk about it because it's so taboo, or it's an elephant in the room kind
And traumatic. And I think, with the boomer generation, with my parents' generation, they just, wanted to move on. They came up in the Jim Crow South, migrated to California, the Great Migration, to get away. I think they, in some parts, they just wanted to forget about it. And then with this promise of civil rights, they figured we were moving on up, and didn't need to talk about it anymore, and that things were changing. But now that we can clearly see that hasn't happened, and they are talking about, critical race theory, but we just did a news article on Burgess Owens. He's put forth a bill to not fund critical race theory, and putting that training in governments and schools and things like that. So, I mean, do we need it or not? I think we need it. And I don't think we're going to stop talking about it. Even if we do get reparations, that doesn't mean we're going to stop talking about our history and what's been done to us, because, future generations need to know, because we see what almost happened when, generations before us stopped talking about it. So I don't think that conversation is going to end anytime soon.
All right. So there's a couple articles that have been thrown out there. One article, it looks like, says that the question is, do women really prefer men with money over looks? One of the most robust findings in evolutionary psychology is the observation that men and women differ in the characteristics they prefer in potential mates. In study after study, in country after country, psychologists consistently find that men strongly prefer looks over resources, whereas women value resources over looks. By the end of the 20th century, women were making great strides in regaining the gender equality they lost at the advent of agriculture. Thus, social role theory predicts that women's preferences in mates should shift back towards looks over resources, to the extent that they're no longer dependent on men to provide for them. In the end, the jury is still out on the question of why there are sex differences in mating preferences. Women's tendency to choose mates for their resources rather than their looks may have evolved in our hunter-gatherer past. The data from modern women's responses tends to support the notion of evolved preferences, but the theory clashes with what we know about the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Women's mating preferences may also be a response to the social roles assigned to them in modern society. Perhaps women would go for looks over resources if they didn't have to worry about the economic consequences of their mating choices. As is always the case in social sciences, further research is required.
All right. Do you agree with that?
That's very interesting because I mean, if you take out capital, right, and if you take out the existence of what we're calling income, currency, money, quote unquote, um, that might be true. I mean, if you take the idea and the concept of money out, right, and we're talking about two human beings trying to, sustain themselves on this planet, and I guess in some cases prosper, right? Taking out the money element, then that might have some validity, right? But when you start putting in the money, in the situations, then it throws a lot of things off, right? I mean, don't quote me, and I don't know the statistics on, what are the number of, divorces or people who separate over money, but I'm pretty sure it's high up there, outside of infidelity. I mean, I just know a lot of people, you know, bicker over finances, and I've seen a couple of shows. Unfortunately, I can't remember what the show's called, but man, these people trying to kill their spouses over, like, their life insurance is insane. I mean, just the mentality it would take to off, the person that you so-called love based on money. Man, that's pretty insane. That's borderline insanity, if not insanity, you know.
Yeah. So those articles were telling us that, women would choose men for security and finance, but now that women are becoming more independent, that they choose looks over finance. Do you find that to be true?
I mean, I can't speak for women, so I don't know. What do you think?
What do I think? I think it depends on, where you are at in your life. I think over our life, our values change. Yeah. And I think that maybe when you're younger and your childbearing years, you might be looking for somebody, wondering what the kids are going to look like, so you might be more attracted to somebody who fits your preferences. And as you grow older and you're more secure in your own career, you might just be interested in somebody with a little more compatibility. I would think those that as you grow older, your values change. That's why they call it settling down. Because at some point, we all settle.
Yep. So speaking of unsettling, the racial wealth gap, which needs to be settled. According to a 2011 study from Pew Research Center, whites possess 20 times more wealth than African Americans and 18 times that of Latinos. Whereas white families have accumulated $113,000, 149 of wealth on average, black households have only accumulated a whopping 5,677 in wealth on average, as shown on yourweb.com. Of the 14 million black households in the United States in 2015, only 5% had more than $350,000 in net worth, and less than 1% of black families had over $1 million in net assets. As of 1999, blacks and whites similarly situated within the, quote, educational middle class, end quote, live in distinct wealth worlds. Whereas educationally, middle class whites possessed 111,000 in median net worth, educationally middle class black families had only 33,500. In terms of assets, the disparity was 56,000 to 15,000. Looking at only the occupational middle class, an equally pronounced gap is visible. Middle class whites had 123,000 in median net worth and 60,000 in median net financial assets, compared to 26,500 and 11,200 for middle class African Americans. According to Thomas Shapiro, white families possess between 3 and 5 times as much wealth as equally achieving black middle class families. A 2016 article entitled Black Wealth Hardly Exists Even When You Include NBA, NFL, and rap stars related recent findings of the Corporation for Economic Development, CFED, and the Institute of Policy Studies, which calculated that it would take 228 years, which I'm pretty sure people who are watching this and who are viewing this probably already know this, but we're going to say it anyway. It would take 228 years for the average black family to amass the same level of wealth the average white family holds today in 2016, or then 2016. According to the Institute of Assets and Social Policy, for each dollar of increase in average income an African American household saw from 84 to 2009, just 69 cents in additional wealth was generated. Wow. Compared with the same dollar in increased income, creating an additional $5.19 in wealth for a similarly situated white household.
And those were 2016 numbers. Would it be interesting to see today's standards, whether it's moved inched up a bit or if it's gone backwards? I wouldn't be surprised if it's gone backwards.
Actually,
all right.
Let's skip this one because I think this might be, let's see. Yeah, so basically this is the same article. So,
Okay.
Yeah, just split up. So yeah, we'll go skip those. See, knocked it out.
All right. There we go. So what do we have up next here? All right. Let's see. How much does an online computer science degree cost? Talking about college, higher education, and what that's going to cost you. Although online computer science degrees usually cost less than traditional degrees, they can still be expensive, ranging from $15,000 to $80,000 total. Here's an example of a cost difference. An in-state student at University of Florida would pay about $15,500 for an online bachelor in computer science. A campus-based in-state Florida student, meanwhile, would pay about $10,000 more just in tuition and fees over 4 years, not even counting room and board. For many schools, tuition can be slightly less for online students who live in the state. For instance, the University of Florida would charge a non-resident online student $50,000 more in tuition than one who lives in Florida. Other colleges, however, charge the same tuition regardless of the student's residence. Do you think that for online that maybe they can make some kind of adjustment to this rule? What difference does it make if they're in the state or not if we're doing online learning?
Valid point or a question. I think they should. I mean, it only makes sense to me. I mean, and that should probably be also part of our reparations package, right?
Definitely.
Online education.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just to put this in context, why some of these slides are being presented, because we're talking about value, right? What it takes to basically reach $120,000, and part of that is actually, getting a quote unquote good education, right? Outside of being an entrepreneur, part of striving in the United States of America is to get a higher education. So supposedly, getting a high value education, according to what we're seeing, doesn't necessarily, especially for black people, equate to a high value earner. So that, putting everything in context. So what's the average cost of law school if you want to be a lawyer? Different factors can affect the average law school tuition cost of $44,600. Here's the average tuition for category of law schools in 2019 to Law School Transparency, a nonprofit focused on consumer advocacy and public education. Public law school for an in-state resident could cost $20,186. Public law school for a non-resident, $41,628. Private law school, $49,312. You also pay a premium to attend specific law schools. Here's how much some top-tier law programs estimate the tuition cost to be for the 2020-21 academic year. Yale Law School, $65,792. $64,350 for Stanford. Harvard, $65,875. Columbia, $72,352. University of Chicago Law School, $68,652. New York University School of Law, $68,348. And University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School, $63,610. So you're going to be coming up, out of pocket and in debt, after graduation. So hopefully you come out of school making some serious bank, because man, this ain't cheap.
No, kind of spendy there. All right, so let's see. There are some jobs where you can earn more than $100K a year. A physician, median base salary, $180K a year. Pharmacy manager, median base salary, $130 a year. Solutions architect, median base salary, $120. I kind of didn't go in order there, but let's go. Well, lawyer, median base salary, $144,500. Strategy manager, median base salary, $130,000. Strategy managers often oversee a company's plans for develop partnerships, encourage growth, and launch new profit-driven initiatives. A bachelor's degree is required, and some employers also require a master's, Glassdoor's listings show. R&D manager, median base salary, $142,000, $120,000. Software development manager, median base salary, $132,000. Software architect, median base salary, $128,250. Integrated circuit designer engineer, median base salary, $127,500. IT manager, median base salary, $120,000. Engagement manager, median base salary, $120,000. Engagement managers are responsible for client relationships. The role requires skills in marketing and project management. Software or technological skills can be useful.
Yep.
Maybe we're in the wrong business. Maybe that's the problem.
So yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get in that high value status level, a high value earning power, I mean, here's some of the careers that one could take a look at. But you're going to be coming out the pocket right out the gate trying to get there. So that's something that people should take a look at, once you minus the debts that one will incur trying to get to this level, and stress too. I mean, you got to talk about like how much time and energy is required to put in, for these types of positions. And when you get out of school, that doesn't even guarantee that you'll even, get these particular type of positions. And oftentimes you start on entry level on top of it, right? So you're talking about, well, I got to get the experience first, and then I can start making the money. But then again, as I said before, you're actually talking about, will somebody actually hire me, to make this type of income? Because I mean, unless you're hooked in with, for example, all right, let's take a lawyer, right? Most people start out, at a firm first before then just, jumping off into, or getting some type of internship before actually starting their own law firm, unless, their parent or they got some kind of generational wealth passed down to them. Most lawyers have to start with some type of experience. And that's a number of years of practice before they actually start their own law firm, right? So, all this needs to be taken into account when we're talking about some of these numbers and figures, and in terms of what is considered high value, and, if it's worth, spending basically you're pretty much your young adulthood, even into adulthood, trying to attain this, high value. And, people have to like say, is it worth it? Is it worth me putting all this time, into the process of becoming a high value person? I don't know. I don't think you can, make high value, working at a fast food restaurant, according to, some of these people that are calling people high value or not.
Well,
And
you're talking about high value in terms of dollars. What about some other qualities that, make a person high value?
well, I mean that could be, what I mean, I don't know if that's subjective or not. I mean, I don't know if I could answer that question, for anybody. I would just say that, in terms of value, I mean, you're talking about compatibility, right? Some people like things this way, some people like things this way. Some people's personalities are this way, some other people's personalities aren't this way, right? So, that really comes back to compatibility. And just to be real, when it comes to value, especially in a relationship, I mean, two people have to understand their worth together, you know what I mean? Not apart, right? You have to understand what each person is actually bringing into the relationship, regardless of who's making what, right? Because some person could be doing very well in their career in terms of making a lot of money, and then the other person could be doing well, and then at one point, the other person could fall off, regardless if it's a man or a woman, and then they're like, okay, what are we going to do now? So the value really comes down to the relationship, right? And what each person can put into it, regardless of who's making what. And that's unfortunate because, some people don't go into, relationships looking at that. And that even comes on, the partnership level in both business and personal level, right? Oftentimes, some people just go into things just like, okay, we need to, let's just do this and let's just do that and see how it works, and just saying, well, wait a minute, let's hold up, let's see how both parties what can we both bring to the table, instead of one person picking up everything at the same time. It really needs to be a compatibility thing in terms of value, right? And
Okay.
that's what I would say in terms of compatibility. I mean, what do you think in terms of, do you think, what's your
I
opinion on?
mean, compatibility, someone that you get along with. Of course, if you're going to be spending copious amounts of time together, you want to be with somebody that you enjoy their company. Integrity is another one. Family values. There's a couple of recent news stories out right now. A couple of high value men in terms of income and making money. Nick Cannon was just on the Breakfast Club yesterday. He makes a lot of money. His interview was talking about how he, not really interested in marriage, but wants to have a bunch of kids, 10 or 12 kids. I mean, I guess if he, pays for these kids, he has the money to do so. That's his business. But is that a high value man who's just, going around leaving his seed everywhere, broken homes everywhere? He's not going to be able to be there for all of these kids and, a nurturing father type of way. I mean, I'm sure he can provide for them financially, but is that high value? And then on the other hand, we have Dr. Dre. I mean, Dr. Dre's story just came out. He's a billionaire and he has his 38-year-old daughter is homeless, sleeping in cars. I mean, so he's got value, monetary value, but does he have character value? And we don't know what the story is between him and his daughter, but I could not see, being a billionaire and letting my family want for anything.
Yep. Those are some great points. Um, as far as Nick Cannon is concerned, I mean, look, dude's got money, you know what I mean? So let's just keep it real. He's got a lot of money. And, if people are on the same wavelength, so a man and a woman are on the same wavelength in terms of, look, this is what we want to bring in. Hey, people going to live how they live. And it would be unfortunate if, Nick or anybody in that particular situation, regardless of money, couldn't be in their kid's life. You know what I mean? Because they happen to bounce from one kid, not in the same family, right? And maybe not even the same city, not in the same state. So, the brother might have to be flying here, there, everywhere, trying to do this, trying to work, trying to do this, and that could just bring a lot of stress on one person. So, I wish him the best. I wish, the women who are in his life the best. But it can be a very convoluted situation. You have like things in some religious practices, like for example in Islam, and I'm not speaking for Islam, I'm just saying this might be some of the practice and misunderstanding practices right within Islam, because some people think because you're Muslim all of a sudden you could just have all these women and wives, but no, you literally have to provide for all those women, you know what I mean, that if it's okay obviously for your first wife then to bring in other women into the relationship, right? Getting quote unquote polygamous relationship. So I mean, in all that said, it's very stressful. You know what I mean, when you're trying to do all that. But anyway, segueing, getting back to value and what that means. Yeah, we just have to understand. I know we're going to be wrapping it up because we're past the hour now, and I want to thank everybody who paid in attention and listened. We just want to thank you, and who's going to see the replay on this, just to see what what we actually think is the difference between value and how and what we determine, what the society and some people determine what is valuable to them and not.
So value is in the eye of the beholder.
In some essence, I think so. I mean, we just have to tread carefully when we start throwing numbers out, like somebody's high value worth or value is worth a certain amount. You know what I mean? That's, you're starting to tread some waters, and then people have to start treading carefully then, because then you're excluding, based on that criteria, a lot of good, both men and women, right? That could be on a compatible level, that could be together regardless of how much they're making, right? So that's
So even if you don't make 10K a week, it doesn't mean you're worthless. You're just worth less.
I know, worth less, right? I think we have one more slide here, men and women want. Should we go through that real quick before wrapping up?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, you could take the first.
All right. So supposedly this is what 7 things men want in a relationship: praise and approval, respect, a sense of sexual connection, emotional intimacy, space, physical touch, and security.
Okay, and important things in a relationship that every woman wants: spontaneity, respect, surprises, sex, romance, time, communication, consistency, and fun. Financing wasn't on that list, was it? I mean, you cut it off before I could reread it. Spontaneity, respect, surprises, sex, romance, time, communication, consistency, and fun. I don't see security on that list, but it is there for men. Interesting. All right. Well, I know we've been at this for a little over an hour, so go ahead and let you get on with the rest of your evening. And with that, we will leave you with another redistricting video here in the city of Sacramento. They are going through the redistricting process of splitting up the districts. I believe that's happening across the nation with the census. So whether you're in Sacramento or not, in your city, your municipality, you should look into what their districting process is and what it means to you. I mean, I'm like, they're probably going to start redistricting, vaccinated people and unvaccinated people into the same districts. You never know. That's why it's important to keep an eye on these people. But until next time.